So if you ask somebody, I'm sure somebody will argue on this line, maybe you can or you can, that sometimes if you are asked to explain, but why are you feeling this way? I don't know. But I feel that way, isn't it? A man would try to give a reason, even if he hasn't any. Right? Women would say, no, but I don't know why, but I think this is the way it is. I'm not feeling good. I don't think that's the right thing to do. So what happened? That's true. That is more frustrating. You're right, absolutely right. Because the man cannot understand that feelings do not necessarily emerge from a finite or a precise knowledge. You don't have to know first, then to feel. In fact, feelings can generate knowledge. Though I give the title Ways of Knowing, Feeling and Doing, that is a manly construction. But I am now trying to deconstruct it, and I want to bring your attention to a very interesting point, which will help us understand how the intuition evolves, or evolved possibly. One of the possible explanations, there may be many. And this has a very great bearing on the way knowledge is produced, different kinds of knowledge are produced. So, in our leisure time, in our dress we have pockets. So I can put my hand in a pocket. Women do not have pockets in their dresses. What they do, when they had leisure, they will be breaking the seeds. So my mother would have a clip and she will take the melon seeds, and when she is talking to her friends, she will be breaking the seeds and take the kernel out to make some sweets. Or she will be knitting. In other words, even in the moments of relaxed reflection, her hands are occupied. And that happened over thousands of years. Whereas men separated the doing part and the feeling part. So when we are doing, we are using our hands, of course, naturally. This part is, of course, there is a story here. That's what I am trying to say. You made it intuitively. But the fact is that women didn't keep their hands idle. Forget about last 200 years. Forget about last 300 years. Go back. And even in the last 300 years, in our continent at least, in our homes, you will recall your mother's grandmother, they would not sit idle in the afternoon. They were doing something. Cleaning things, processing things, knitting sweaters, whole range of things. Crochet work. My mother would make crochet now, even now at this age, she would take the polythenes, cut that into pieces of different colors, then she will knit mats out of polythene so that it doesn't go waste, and then these mats she will give to people, so that whenever you have to use a table mat, use the mats knitted of polythene. So, she has innovated, so to say, a craft around polythene bags. But because the skill of crochet she had, yes.
Those days the men's were separated only for the hard work. For example, they have to go field and women are separated from only the housekeeping. So they have to do this.
No, but the question is, when men were relaxing, they were relaxing.
They were focused on relaxing.
Whereas, even in the moment of relaxation, women were working. They could relax. Okay, all right. I mean, that is a very manly statement that they relax better by working. That's okay. But the question is, if you are doing things when you are reflecting, the synapses in the brain, the neural network that gets built in the brain is of a different kind. So you have more interconnected brain of women than men. So any event anywhere in your worldview affects everything else for women. Men can, as we all know, compartmentalize. Isn't it? Men can separate. Men has different folders in which he files the things. Correct? For women, it is very difficult to file the things in separate folders. You understand what I am saying? So the result is that interconnectedness, because there is the way mind is wired, the brain is wired, is in an interconnected manner. It has two implications. One, if you do an analysis of a language written by a woman writer and a man writer, some linguists have tried to do that analysis. Very interesting. You will find more tentative statements, tentative verbs in women's writing. More indeterminate forms, more uncertain outcomes. Perhaps, maybe, could be. As against, this is what he did, past perfect. So, language was also getting shaped in the process by the way mind was getting wired. Mind was getting wired, brain was getting wired because of the way we were using our hands. So, the evidence of this relationship is those of our writers and thinkers who use their hands much more than others while composing either their music or their hymns acquired a great intuitive ability to articulate, whether it's Kabir, Rahim, because Kabir was weaver, So while he was weaving, he was composing his hymns. His hands were occupied. His eyes were focused, but his mind was working. And because just like a warp and the waft of the cloth that he was weaving, his brain also was getting wired or reorganized. So he could say in two lines what many of us may not be able to say in 2 chapters or 2 books. Isn't it? That ability, to my mind, and this is my hypothesis, is feminization of the consciousness. Kabir or Rahim, these poets, had feminized their consciousness. They had acquired the ability of feminine intuitiveness to be able to distill so much in so few words. So perhaps poets, many poets, not all, but many poets, have that ability. In our language, poem is she, song is he. गाना गाता है, कविता गाती है, कविता लिखी जाती है. It's very interesting. The language makes poem the she and song the he. So, one of the aspects of language is that the language did not evolve independent of the tool. This is the first. So, tools. So, theory is like this. Tool influence language directly and through the relationship So, tools shape feelings through language and also directly. So, if you do not allow certain tools to be used by women, then they would not be able to have those constructions in mind which evolve when you use those tools. So, it is not for nothing that the differences have evolved, and to my mind these differences can be synergistic but can also be used for manipulative purpose. In society we have also used it for manipulation purpose. By assigning certain tasks, certain challenges differently to different gender. So sometimes we give hard problems to men, easier problems to women, thinking that they will not be able to handle, which has nothing to do with empirical reality. But a selection of that kind of role can get reinforced, because we are not challenged enough. And if they are not challenged enough, they will not be able to develop reflexes to show that kind of imaginative sweep that is necessary. It's also interesting that if you read the narratives, recently last Sunday, Lynn Ostrom, Nobel laureate, wrote, there was an interview in Indian Express. McClintock, who got Nobel Prize for jumping genes in maize, was also interviewed once. And somehow, whenever you read biographies of great women inventors, you always come across this tension that they had to make some extra effort to be recognized. Other thing being equal, they had to make extra effort to be recognized, because their language was not, quote unquote, precise. They were explaining far too many things. They were not focused. Not far too focused. They were not far too focused. They had too much, they could see too many dimensions at the time, which is a wonderful, I mean, if you want word to be more holistically driven, then there will be a need for that kind of a understanding. The problem with this notion is that this can also be used for exploitation. So I did a study in Ahmednagar some years ago on women moneylenders, 1983-84. And I wanted to see whether women moneylenders were kinder, benign, more compassionate than men moneylenders. They weren't. Simply because they had more information. They had more inside information about which utensil the lady had still in the house. She said, no, you have something. You have that vessel in your house. Why don't you bring that? I have dialogues of these borrowers and women moneylenders. And this was a very shattering experience for me, because I had a stereotype in my mind. And that stereotype was broken that day, that is through that empirical work, because she had more information about what the borrower had in her house, from whom had he or she borrowed what, because the grapevine was quite strong. And they discussed these things, who had purchased what. The women want to tell about these things. So this knowledge was available in the society. She used that knowledge to make sure that her loans were secured, more secured than the loans of the men. So therefore, it was more exploitative, if I may use that phrase. She was probably more exploitative than the man moneylender would have been. So it is not necessarily true that women would use this knowledge of being able to see interconnections always for a benign purpose. It is a socio-political context in which different women and different men will use this knowledge differently. But evolutionary, from pure simple biological point of view, we know that certain tools were denied. There is a very interesting book, Mothers and Daughters of Invention, by Autumn Stanley. And in this book, she wrote this book in 13 years, looking at the data of US Patent and Trademark Office, and she analyzed 200 years history of patents in US, and tried to analyze what kind of inventions women patented. 200 years data, 13 years of work. Amazing work. And tragedy is that this work, I was recently in Max Planck Institute in Munich, and I asked people sitting in the Intellectual Property Academy of Germany, which is one of the most respected authorities. I said, how many of you have read this book? Not one. I asked this question in Harvard. How many of you, in a very big meeting where a lot of people, professors were sitting? Not one. So it's very strange that this book has remained very obscure, even though being on such a topical subject. What did she find? She found that the share of women was 2% till 80s. 2%. And then she went to ask further questions. Why is it 2%? Is it that the women cannot handle complexity? So then she showed patents for very complex machines. For example, the first powered loom, the COBOL language, or COBOL or Pascal, one of the computer language, was designed by a lady inventor. Babbage, what was that?